This is the Team Objection podcast for November 21st, 2019, episode 415. It's a pairing you haven't seen in quite some time.
It's just originals.
Yeah. Dave was not in the picture. Nobody cares about Dave. His son was born safely. That's the update you get for Dave. That's all we're going to talk about in this episode. Forget him otherwise. We also have to do some programming notes up front. There won't be a show next week. Next Thursday is Thanksgiving. We've done Thanksgiving episodes in the past. They always did really poorly. For some reason, it's like people want to spend time with their families and don't engage with their online stuff that day. It's weird. So, no show next Thursday. We'll be back December 5th. And we might have a special guest, but I haven't booked that for sure yet, so no promises.
It won't be Michelle. She's as dead as Dave is.
Yep, both dead.
More dead than Dave is, even.
Well, I mean, we've seen him more recently, so the body, at the very least, is less cold.
It's true.
So instead, we're going to introduce a new segment that we did not name. And I'm only realizing that as I'm about to introduce it, and I go, oh yeah, we have no idea what to call this thing. It can't be Time Capsule, because we already have a segment named that.
Yeah. We're basically looking back. We're trying to determine the best year of gaming ever, which is probably something we could look to kind of call the segment, the best year of gaming ever. And we're going to tackle this year by year. We're going to examine the offerings. We're going to judge them for on their own merits, as well as the nostalgia factor, where we were during the time when it came out. And it's going to get a little silly if we're talking about games released in 2018, but that's not the first year we're going to tackle anyway, so it's fine. We have a buffer.
In retrospect, this is kind of a glaring hole in our time capsule game. I think we did the original Super Mario Brothers as one item, but other than that, I don't know that we ever did very many video games for that segment, and we probably should have, because we were running out of like random pop culture things like Tamagotchi to do, so we probably should have thought about that, but there's still time.
Well, Dave is such a handicap when it comes to talking about video games. He's played like 5 in his whole life.
I mean, I'm not going to go to bat for Dave constantly in his absence when you attack him, but I will say, for these type of things, back in the day, it's perfect. It's tough to talk about modern games with Dave anymore because he plays like 2 a year, but back then, he actually played several of the titles we're going to mention. Back then. But it's fine.
God, if I could only play 2 games a year, I'd kill myself. I mean, that's great, Dave.
Happy
Happy day
of his birth. It's not clear. We're not really sure what's happening with that. Anyways,
we don't care enough to find out. So
we thought about trying to do this maybe chronologically or something. That gets weird because where do you start? Like 1981 when Pong came out, and
yeah,
let's talk about Pong.
Boring. No one, for the most part, no one wants to hear about those early years.
No, I think where we're starting is an interesting point. We might go a year or two before that just because there are several like Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis games that I think would still make enough of a segment for it. But let's be honest, I think the true gaming renaissance began right around 1996 or 1997. It was a big market before then, but it wasn't completely mainstream, I don't think. I think it was still sort of in that border between niche and like overwhelmingly popular. We're going to start with 1996, and that's the point at which you start to introduce some of the newer systems, and the point at which one game in particular made this thing just take off into the stratosphere.
Let me paint a picture for you, Chris.
Okay.
1996, little Shaun with his suspenders and his little parted hair, going to class, caring sincerely about how his class pictures would turn out. 4th grade. So excited about video games. The Nintendo 64 had just come out. I was all a tizzy for the Nintendo 64. I wanted one so bad. And it wouldn't happen in this year. But I saw plenty of it, and it was enough to... I liked video games, but it was around this time when I really started getting into games. Like wanting to play them all the time. Actually thinking maybe I could ask for a system for... like my birthday or something. It mattered that much to me.
Little baby Chris, 5th grade, polyester pants, too much Velcro, horrible colors. But it was the mid 90s, so we were still getting over that early 90s. Like everything has to have lots of splashes of color on it. That very quickly we realized no, they don't. I wouldn't consider myself a huge gamer yet. I was definitely playing my Super Nintendo when I was at my dad's, but I was only there every other weekend. So at home, I had a handful of really rudimentary computer games on a really, really shitty computer. And besides that, I wasn't doing a ton of it. But I, too, saw the N64, and I thought that could be me someday. It took me a couple of years, I think. I think it was when Smash came out that I finally put some money I'd saved towards it. So that was probably 98. But in 96, a friend of mine, my best friend in elementary school, had a Nintendo 64, so I was playing at his house as often as I could.
Yeah. I had a friend who rented a Nintendo 64 from bashes. That used to be a thing you could do.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such a big deal when he rented it. And I was like, oh my God, he's going to get Mario 64, Mario Kart 64, all these cool games. He got Goemon, Legend of the Ninja or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I was so mad. And I was a petulant little child, so I like yelled at him too.
Did he learn a lesson?
I don't think so. He was like, well, guess what? You don't have to play it.
Like,
and he didn't invite me over that weekend.
For some reason.
It's like there are consequences for yelling at him for using his own money to rent this console.
Well, I remember that experience too. I don't know if I've told the story or not, but kids these days, as we go down this road, won't understand the idea of going to even just any store, let alone a grocery store, which is even more confusing at the time. But renting a system, checking it out for a couple days. My aunt did this for that same friend of mine and me when we were in Colorado one year, and it was great. At the time, I don't think I realized that she had to put down either a $150 or $200 deposit.
This place was $150, so yeah, that makes sense.
So you were basically handing over a lot of money, effectively enough to buy the thing, just to rent it for the weekend. And I get it. I understand why stores did that. It's a tremendous undertaking for them. But imagine trying to pitch that to certain parents at the time, being like, hey, Mom, I just want to rent this system. How much is it? Oh, $150. Like, sure, you'll get it back as long as I don't break it. Do you trust your 11-year-old not to break it?
Yeah.
Anyways.
Well, and back in the day, all I had was a Game Boy. So it was like, I'm seeing Mario run around in a 3D space, and then I'm like, Donkey Kong side-scroller on my Nintendo, on my Game Boy that I still needed a lamp, or I had a swizzle light thing.
Mm-hmm.
Man.
Or Super Mario Land, which is a fine game and all, but boy, you look at that compared to even the NES one, let alone Mario 64, and you're like, ugh.
Yeah, it was like growing up in a cave, and all you could see is like shadows on the wall, and then going outside and saying, oh my God, there's a whole other dimension that is out there. It was amazing.
So Mario 64 is important for two reasons. One of which, and the main one, is of course the transition to 3D gaming and its effect on it, and the fact that it's way better than it has any right to be for a first crack at a 3D game, even from a major company like Nintendo. The other is those bright colors. I think a lot of the reason why Nintendo succeeded so well with Mario 64 is that it's just a bright, vibrant, beautiful, happy-go-lucky game, and it was exactly what people really wanted on a new system like that.
Yeah, well, there's so much charm. I remember seeing the PlayStation. This had now been out for 2 years, and I wasn't that interested because everything was so drab, and they could do 3D, but it looked like it was muddy textures and like two-tone colors, and it just wasn't exciting. Mario 64 comes out, like you said, it just looks great. It's charming the way he moves, his little, little nuances they program into him, even in 1996. Not to mention, it's like the first 3D game to figure out the camera. And it had some work to do, but it was still leaps and bounds ahead of everything else that had come out before it in handling that issue.
Yeah. I have a vague recollection of some articles in like a Game Informer or some other similar magazine that was around at the time, because there were many more of them back then, talking about how, when will this transition to 3D officially work? Because there were a lot of clunkers in the beginning, and it was a slow learning curve, so that makes sense. But those questions got eradicated when this game came out. Not that it was perfect or anything, but like you said, there was such leaps and bounds above anything else we had seen at that point. And for that to be Nintendo's first crack at it is kind of just remarkable.
I just think it's so funny that them figuring out the camera was such a big deal, that the camera was a character in the game. Like it was that much of a area of focus that it was its own. It was Lakitu. He was like a person in the game,
which is a very Nintendo thing to do.
Yeah,
to personify a game element and do it in a way that makes it kind of endearing is very Nintendo.
Yeah, so that was out. Wave Race 64. I'm sure has not aged well, but at the time, I was all about it. The water, like the textures and the way that they programmed the water was so amazing, flipping everywhere. I was way into Wave Race 64.
Didn't play a ton of it. Played some. A friend of mine had it, so that we played a little bit of it that way. By the time we really started having better access to the N64, Mario Kart 64 was out, so that ended up getting the bulk of our focus and not Wave Race. But That and Pilot Wing 64 also came out around the same time. I liked the Super Nintendo one, although I was terrible at it.
Yeah.
And I was not good at this one either, but I still enjoyed it. It was fun.
Yeah, Shadows of the Empire was another one for the 64 that was like a must-play back then, and yeah, I don't know if it's playable anymore. It was rough. That was a rough example. Worth it for the story. Like, the story's really good. It's like an essential piece of Star Wars lore that's no longer canon, but yeah, it was great at the time.
So Super Mario RPG is in this year, to go to a non-N64 one.
That's interesting.
I feel like this game is somewhat slept on now, in light of primarily the Paper Mario series, which has kind of expanded it to even bigger heights since then. But at the time, Nintendo and Square collaborating on something seemed pretty rare. Yeah, the companies worked with each other. I mean, a lot of the Square RPGs came out on the SNES. But to have Square dip their toes on something with Mario was kind of like, what?
Well, yeah, because by this time, Square had or was very close to jumping ship.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the CD-ROM, I believe was the case in the issue. Yeah, so that was a big deal. And growing up, being such a Square fan, seeing that there was a collaboration, that was really exciting. And it was a Mario game with a tone unlike any other Mario game. It's a tone I miss a little bit because there was a little bit of like seriousness to the story that the Paper Mario games don't really try to emulate. They go heavy into the humor, which is great.
Yeah, but it's not the same.
No, it's not the same, and I really liked it. I thought it was a great story.
And a lot of Paper Mario and its success is owed to this game because, I mean, the idea of like Bowser being a party member. Who would have thought about that?
Exactly.
All of a sudden, yeah, Geno's around. Bowser's trying to reclaim his throne. And you fight him in the beginning. And you're like, haha, standard Mario. Bowser's my enemy. And then very quickly the game's like, no, he's not your enemy. In fact, he's going to join you later. The princess is going to join you. She hasn't gotten to do a whole lot like she's in Mario 2. But Mario 2 doesn't count.
Yeah.
So all of that was really cool. I mean, that's a game that I still enjoy quite a bit. Holds up decently well, and the kind of claymation-y kind of look still looks decent. I mean, it's 23 years ago, so
This story, it's captivating. I'm like, it's probably not as good now. If I'm probably remembering it too well.
I played it for the channel 3 or 4 years ago. I think it holds up okay. It's short. It's probably a 15-hour game, but it doesn't really ever overstay its welcome. You go to some interesting places. You have some interesting characters. You fight a lot. The battle system is fun. Music's catchy, and that's that.
I didn't know it was only 15 hours. Well, there you go.
Yeah, not super long. You can get back into it and play through it and be done with it before you know it.
Resident Evil, the first one. Resident Evil was its name.
Yeah.
Came out.
The first one.
And, yeah, pretty much this and Silent Hill spawned a genre, survival horror. I didn't realize, like, the creator of Silent Hill and Resident Evil actually coined that phrase, because he was like, well, it seems so like intuitive and natural now, but there wasn't really a word for it. And he just said, it's more than just horror. There's an element of resource management and different elements where it's survival horror. That's what it is. And 1996 was kind of the birth of that in a lot of ways.
This is another one where I feel like we've kind of lost sight of our roots, and maybe this is just us being old men yelling at clouds, but to me, the impact of Resident Evil in particular is sort of lost now, and it wouldn't have worked before PlayStation or N64. You needed to have the 3D so that you could be more immersed, because it's really difficult to be like spooked or scared by the ambiance of a 2D game.
Yeah.
To me, it's not impossible. Some games have done it, but it's just not the same as this idea of being this kind of over-the-shoulder look and always being concerned about what's behind you and not being able to see it. As in a 2D game, you're always going to have a sense of what's around you. Here, could be anything behind you.
Well, so this was, if there was a perfect era for a perfect game, this was it. So you're in 1996, 3D is still being worked out, so the controls are not great.
Mm-hmm.
And you get some grace from the gamers. They're not expecting excellent controls, but the controls being bad, you being a Sherman tank going through a narrow hallway, is part of why it's so scary. That ups the fear, because nowadays you're so capable in horror games. A lot of times you're not even that worried. You have the full disposal of modern gaming techniques to back you up. Back then, it was, you see a zombie in a hallway, half the battle is just maneuvering your character to walk away from it, let alone trying to get a good shot on it. So it enjoyed this grace period from gamers, which also helped add to the horror element of it. It was just perfect.
I don't know how great the first game really is. I think it's decent. I don't think it holds up well at all, but of course it's been remade since then, so that helps with some of those problems. But the fact that it was here and it was this influential, weirdly enough, I mean, that came out basically the same month as Mario RPG, and just look at how different those were. Like the next-gen system versus the old gen, a weird merging of ideas versus a completely new one, same month.
Yeah, well, I can't imagine playing this now the way it was meant to be played. The inventory management is so cumbersome. The way you navigate the mansion, I know there's one route that after you go through it 3 times, the handle breaks. So from then on out, you have to go the long way around every time.
Yeah.
It's little things like that. If you're willing to play it, if you're willing to be tolerant of it, I'm sure it was great. But like these days, I can't do that. I don't have the patience, time, or skill to do that anymore.
Yeah, I think a lot of times gamers reminisce about this era and that difficulty, as it were, but I don't think that many of them actually want to go back to it. They think they do. They have kind of memories of it at the time, and you can argue it was all part of the experience. I get that. But nowadays, with the conveniences and the additional factors that gamers have at their disposal, God, no.
Yeah, you really want to go back to ribbons for saving? An item that you need to collect in order to save the game? Are you kidding me?
No, thank you. Like I understand people not wanting to be able to save anywhere and everywhere. I can see why that could be viewed as a negative. But yeah, this idea of like survive just to save, no, no.
Yeah.
Imagine trying to do that now. Like as a kid, it was fine, I guess, because you could stay up a little later or you could do whatever. But now, when I prefer gaming to be more bite-sized at times, it's nice to be able to be like, okay, I'm going to play that game for 5 minutes and I know I can stop, as opposed to, well, I guess I'm going to be late to my job because I can't find a fucking ribbon to save my stupid game.
Exactly.
No, thank you.
Yeah, so I have a concern, though. So in going through these games, there's a few more we have to touch on, but like this year, if we were to do 2019, there's a bunch of games I would put on this list that I know I'm going to try to hit. That probably wouldn't come up on a list like this. So I'm trying to think, are there any games in 96 that maybe weren't on a list of like the best games, but definitely were games that helped make the library really robust, games that maybe didn't get the best reviews, but you definitely wanted to play, add it to your collection?
NBA Hang Time qualifies for me.
Yeah.
Last day of the year, December 31st.
Oh, dang.
Now, I probably liked the original NBA Jam more, or at least I played it a hell of a lot more. But Hang Time kind of had that boosted graphics. It had the substitutions. It had the more modern rosters. The Suns actually had decent players. Because let's be honest, the original NBA Jam, except for one format, had KJ and Marley, which was great, but you wanted Charles Barkley, and you weren't going to get him.
Yeah.
And you wanted Michael Jordan, and you weren't going to get him.
Hang Time was like a dream come true for me. Getting to play NBA Jam is basically what it was, but on a modern console.
Yep, on the consoles it was a lot better than the NBA Jam was, and in the arcades, I mean, it was just an additional fun version of it. Everybody got it because the NBA Jam went so bonkers. All the arcades were like, well, we have to get this. So that was one. You put me in like a random restaurant or some place that has like 5 to 10 games. This was almost always going to be the one I went to. I wasn't going to a shooter because I wasn't going to pour quarters into it. I only had a couple.
Yeah.
So I was going here, and I loved it.
Did they have a playoff mode?
I don't remember. I mean, I remember there was one in particular that I could at least keep track of. Like you could put your initials in and you could continue like the season mode. So there was one I went to enough to keep track of that. I don't remember if it had anything more robust than that, though.
I don't know if I remember telling you this story or not. I think it says a lot about my character and a lot about me. I played this game probably every day for, I don't know, months easily, maybe more. And once I found out that there was no postseason, so there was no goal, you were just playing regular season games to infinity. That was it for me. I quit. I needed a goal at the end of the rainbow. I needed to be the champion.
I mean, I think the goal was essentially supposed to be to beat every team because it was sort of like a Mortal Kombat tower style progression of like they put the crappy teams at the bottom and the really good teams at the top, and you're supposed to keep winning your way through them. But then that was it. When you beat the last team, you're done.
Yeah. And isn't that sad? Even in my arcade dreams, the Suns still can't win a championship.
Nope.
Damn.
Well, I think it's supposed to be, an ode to real life where they also can't win a championship.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, no matter what.
No matter
Hell
what we
could
do.
freeze over. They're not going to win a championship.
Yeah. No matter what. It's been 50 years, so what's stopping them now?
Yeah.
Almost. I don't know what else is on this list that so there's some critically acclaimed stuff that we'll have to talk about, but I'm trying to see some other ones that fit your example of not well regarded but fun to play.
I'm sure there's some Game Boy. There has to be some Game Boy games is what I'm thinking. I want to look up best Game Boy games of 1996 because that was probably my primary console at the time. I would get home from school, play on the couch on my Game Boy. I just had the Game Boy under the couch.
I found one. I think I've talked about this on the show before, but Kirby's Block Ball was 1996.
I've never even heard of that, but I love Kirby.
That was the breakout version with just Kirby in it, and he got certain power-ups that he could use to burst through the blocks, and it was all Kirby-themed and had the music, and played the hell out of that game on my Game Boy. And that's probably the Kirby game I've played the most, weirdly enough. I've played others, but that's the one I poured time into.
There's going to be some weird game like Metroid Prime and Pokemon, Metroid Pinball and Pokemon Pinball. Pokemon Pinball especially. I poured way more time into that than I should have.
And weirdly enough, even though I played a lot of pinball video games on a bunch of different systems, including Metroid Prime Pinball a lot, I'd never played Pokemon Pinball, not once. I've never played it.
You'd love it. You can actually catch the Pokemon in the pinball game.
Somehow I just missed it. I guess it was because I had only enough money to buy the mainline games or something, but I never ever played it. I don't even think for a second.
Yeah, I mean Japan got. We'll get to this eventually. They got their Pokemon in '96.
Mm-hmm. Took us 2.5 years to get it. I never realized that. I knew it was a gap, but
let me just say it doesn't count for this. But the fever for Pokemon had started probably around 1996. I know that we were getting screenshots. There was an anime that was coming out. My friend made all these he cut out pieces of paper with the names of the Pokemon on them and put them in little glass ball things, and we took them outside, and they got the storm hit, and they all drowned. It was very sad.
What's nice is we don't really have to tell people to imagine what the fervor for that series would have been like because we saw it reenacted with Pokemon Go. In some ways bigger because it was more accessible. Anybody with a phone could do it. But the intensity wasn't the same as it was back in 98 when that first dropped. We'll talk about that in 98. But
yeah.
Boy, I remember it was a huge problem in schools. Schools were like, what the hell is happening right now? These kids are secretly trading in the back of the class and they're not paying any attention. And then, of course, they realize that there's nothing you can do. If there's an electronic device, kids are going to play games on it. TI-85, playing a game on it.
Yep, I brought mine to school.
Yep.
My parents didn't let me. I snuck it in my backpack. Joke's on them.
Let's see.
96 Tekken 2, which
solid
was
I played some of it in the arcade. I remember. I liked 3 more. I liked tag more.
Tomb Raider, big deal.
Huge deal. Can't overlook it. We have to talk about it some. I mean, you remember all the ads for it? I remember all the ads for it. Again, gaming magazines back then. All of a sudden, there's this weirdly proportioned, pixelated woman. And you're like,
yeah.
what?
Was the game actually good, though? I mean, even for its time, was it good, or was it just sex appeal?
I think it was fine. It's another one that would not hold up well at all today. Period. Those controls must feel like just garbage now. But, I mean, I think the gameplay was fine. And, again, it sort of has a similar grace period that you talked about with Resident Evil, where it's like, well, this is new, and it's, a brand new series and a new 3D environment, and it's interesting, so it's fine. I think that love affair wore off pretty quickly. By the second or third release in the Tomb Raider series, people were like, okay, this is not really evolving, and she's still just a sex symbol.
Yeah. Excuse me. On the other side of that, we got Crash Bandicoot, which was Naughty Dog's. I would have to say it's their first foray into games.
I'd be curious to look that up, but it's the first time I remember ever hearing about them.
And that was huge. That was as close to a mascot for the PlayStation as we probably ever got.
I mean,
Crash Bandicoot.
Lara Croft, I suppose, is sort of up there too, but kind of, for the original PlayStation, yeah.
And then Twisted Metal too. That was big for the time.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't care a whole lot, but apparently they had different endings for the characters, and a bunch of my classmates were just they would tell me about all the different endings, and they were so stupid. But apparently, it's like a wish. You get a wish if you win, or a bunch of money. One of the two.
It's a series I never played.
Yeah.
Maybe once at a friend's house, and I barely remember it. I know people love it, and I don't have any hate for it myself, but I just never got into it.
Quake was good. I'm not a huge into shooters, but Quake, we would have a typing class, and I don't know why the teacher allowed this. All of my friends would link up and play Quake on the computers in this typing room. And the teacher would just sit there and not do anything. And I would listen to Korn. It was a really influential time playing violent shooters with my friends and listening to Korn.
There's another game on this list that's the same thing, which is Diablo. And I know in high school there were a couple teachers that were playing each other during class in Diablo, let alone encouraging kids to do it, which a lot of them were trying to do in like a break or an off class time or something. Those two combined, I mean, those both had to have sold probably 4 or 5 million copies, and obviously Diablo obviously spawned a huge series out of it. Huge deals at the time. Huge. You just had to have a computer that could run them.
Yeah.
Which, home computing at that point was just starting to become more common.
No, but luckily at school they invested so much in our education that they would run violent video games.
Yep. That was not a problem. You could go there and it was easy.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to play it at home, it was tougher. Most people didn't have a computer that could do it, and if you did, you were getting yelled at to get off the computer because your family only had one, and they wanted to do it like Excel spreadsheets on it or something.
Oh yeah, dial up. I was trying to talk to my girlfriend at night, and she's like, "I'm sorry, my dad wants to get on the computer," and I was like, "I hate him. I hate your dad.
Your dad sucks."
I want to look this up. What's his band? Oh yeah. Hold on. What's the name? No, not Blink 182. Offspring. I gotta look up the release date because it has to be close to this time.
Okay. Find out.
It was 98.
Whole cut
segment.
my life into pieces.
That is not Offspring.
You're right.
So Daggerfall was another one for some kind of like weird RPGs. You had Star Ocean and Elder Scrolls 2.
I played the original Star Ocean. I was actually a pretty big Star Ocean fan through 3, and I guess 4 was okay, and 5 was such absolute garbage that I haven't even considered ever playing any game in the series ever again.
4 I heard was controversial though, right? 4 was like it's all a game or something.
The series has at multiple points tried to play with that concept. 3 did it as well.
Okay.
I don't remember if 4 did actually. I don't think so, but I played it once and then stopped thinking about it. I think that's my favorite of the series, although 3 is also up there. The original one, by the way, is important because for the Super Nintendo, it didn't have any room for anything on those cartridges. They have voice clips on there. They're horrible. Like, they're some of the worst voice acting you've ever heard. They must have had some of the people on the development staff come into a microphone and, like, get real close on top of it and deliver their lines. But they're there. It was a big deal for Super Nintendo fans. It was horrible, but again, you can be like, wow, they're talking in my game. And then 2 years later, that idea was just blown out of the water.
I had the same thing with, like, Star Fox, though. That was huge back then.
Consider, like, people often talk about how, like, the first Star Fox is better, and I understand the sentiment, but the second one just expands on the first in so many ways. Like, there's a whole story and stuff, and instead of the characters going like, they're actually talking.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's part of why I love 64. It's campy, but I love the camp.
Yeah. There was one, Donkey Kong Country 3. Favorite Donkey Kong Country. Favorite Donkey Kong game. 64 was weird, but it was fine. I enjoyed it. And Donkey Kong 1 and 2 were excellent, but Donkey Kong Country 3, there's just something about it. Probably Dixie. I loved her power. That was awesome. And I played the whole game with a friend. We got all the special coins and the secret world, and man, I poured hours into that game.
Well, that series is one of many. That's the reason why I like co-op games so much, and that's a great example. I think I like the first one the best, but all 3 are very good, and I like them all. I mean, I have a hard time juggling which one. The first was just important to me because it was the first, but the third probably is the best, and I have no problem with that. It's great. That was November, right around Thanksgiving. It's just a weird time to release a video game.
Yeah, well, so...
Because Black Friday, it wasn't exactly then what it is now. So it's not like, I'll put it out by Thanksgiving so everybody snatches it up for the holiday shopping. No, not so much back then.
I mean, that kind of takes me through the big ones that I had for 96. Suikoden, don't even know how to say it. That tells you how much I probably played it.
Mm-hmm.
I know Persona, it was a cult following, and it led to one of the biggest JRPG franchises there is now, so that was pretty big.
We didn't mention Kirby Superstar. That
came out that year?
Yep.
What the hell?
September 1996, March in Japan.
And that's just like traditional Kirby 2D.
Yeah.
I probably played that.
Bright, colorful,
probably loved
fun.
it. Yeah.
That's probably the one I played the most that wasn't Block Ball. I guess maybe the 4-player one for, what was that, the Wii? Return to Dreamland, is that what that one is? That's probably the one I played the most. But this one was up there. Of all the Kirby games I played, it's a lot of fun. Some people probably think it's the best. I don't know.
What bothers me too, so Yoshi, I think makes a lot of sense to make that like a kid game. Like that's fine. Kirby, I always thought Kirby was badass. And I thought the story was really cool, and they always did like almost anime-esque like fights in that game. And then now it's like, okay, but he's yarn now, and it's for babies.
And it's like they could have done that with those two, but still put out some of the more serious ones. It's like the original of Yoshi's Island, for example, was certainly not an easy game or a kid's game by any means. You can argue that chasing down Mario with a timer is a little more forgiving than like dying from damage, but besides that, that's not an easy game. And yet both of them have been basically just relegated to the trash bin of, it's a baby game.
Yeah,
I know they have more depth than that, especially Yoshi still, but Kirby especially is just kind of like, all right, have fun.
I don't get it. Kirby was one of the coolest Nintendo characters, and he's been destroyed. He's almost got it more dirty than Samus. Almost. Not quite.
I mean, he still exists, so...
Yeah. But
God, I know what you mean.
Like, you look at the Kirby and Smash Brothers, you're like, who is this now? He's awesome.
He's Sakurai's favorite character, which is why he's featured so prominently in Smash. It's too bad it doesn't extend his influence to anything else in games.
I know.
Nights into Dreams was 1996. Never played it. It's a game some people love.
Yeah, that was with that weird, like, clown-looking thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Sega Saturn, a system I never, ever played.
Oh, my God.
Not once.
Sega Saturn. When did that come out?
I'd have to look.
That might be... I'm going to look that up. I'm going to get our HR team on it.
Guardian Heroes also came out on the Sega Saturn that year, which I never played at the time, but got to later. And it's a really cool take on the kind of, like, side-scroller beat-em-up type game that had... like a leveling system and magic and stuff. So it was, at the time, super advanced in a genre that I liked, but I never had a Saturn, so I never played it then.
Google didn't even know the release date, just like every other person on the planet.
Google's like, what is a Sega Saturn?
It is 1995. It came out in 1995. So,
Boy.
To no fanfare, no advertising. It's just like, here it is. And no one bought it.
I mean...
not surprising at all.
It's amazing how quickly Sega died. Because the Genesis was fine. The Genesis was really good. It was neck and neck with Nintendo. At times, it was ahead of the SNES. And then, there was the controversial thing about Nintendo not wanting to switch to discs, which we alluded to earlier. But the N64 did fine, and the PlayStation did great, and the Saturn just went...
Yeah, it was a lame... I don't like the name either, for what that's worth.
That's like, why? I'm sure there's a reason. I don't care to look it up. There's one selling for $2,100 on eBay right now.
Yeah.
There's one selling for $2,500 on eBay now.
It's like more successful by far than when it came out. Yeah. Sega's kind of, they're doing okay now, but obviously they're no longer competing in the console wars at all.
No.
So
rest in peace, I guess.
Yeah.
Street Fighter Alpha 2. Probably the worst Alpha game. Some people like it, I suppose.
Many. I don't know.
Well,
how you
actually,
keep
no.
track.
Alpha 1's the worst. What am I saying?
I
Alpha
don't know
2's
how
fine.
you keep track of all the Street Fighter games. It's amazing to me.
That's because I played them a lot in the arcades at the time. It's the only reason I know. Alpha 3 was the best. I think that's 98, so we'll get to it I'm just making sure there's nothing else that isn't even worth mentioning, because there's a handful in here. But we We hit the big ones. Destruction Derby 2, I never played. I played the original, and I liked Destruction Derby 1 a lot. It's exactly what you think. You just drive cars into other cars and blow them up.
I'm sure there's some little games that we're missing, but like the point is, we have most of the ammunition for debating if 96 is the best year ever.
No.
I would say I think it's not going to be.
No.
But
I don't even know if it makes the top 3.
We'll get there. This is building towards throning the number 1, but yeah, probably ranking at least the top 5. I don't know if we're going to rank every single one, but
some of them won't be worth ranking. Some of them we might not even do as a segment, or it'll be a segment where we talk about all the ones we're not going to do because there's like 3 games of note in them.
Yeah.
Which is going to be stunning, especially as you get later. You know, if there's not that many games in like 1992, well, you know, the industry was still building back then. But if there's a shitty year like 2005, I don't know if 2005 is bad, I'm just saying it. That's going to be weird because gaming's at that point a well-known hobby, and we'll see. We lived through some other years as we were trying to choose which one to do first, and there are some years that have a bunch of titles we'll be eager to talk about, and there are some years that do not.
I actually don't think this year, while we've had some solid games, it hasn't been like great.
Well, I mean, this year is important. There's several series that we mentioned. Again, like Mario 64 is not launched, but Diablo and Quake and Tomb Raider and Resident Evil all started here. But are there entries from back then, ones that endure the test of time?
Oh, yeah.
Really, no. No, not really.
Yeah,
So
well,
that's
and we're not going to tackle 2019, but just for example, like I don't think 2019 has had any like huge games. Potentially some, Death Stranding, but that's mixed at best.
Yeah.
Then you had some solid games, the new Dark Souls clone and a new Resident Evil remake, but
Fire Emblem's good, but is it like generationally good? No.
Yeah. We haven't had like one of those games, I feel like, in 2019.
We're enjoying Pokemon quite a bit so far, but is it like, whoa, oh my god, no. I like what it's done with the formula, but it doesn't like reinvent the wheel.
And you can look for that review.
Yeah, maybe in 2 weeks. Depends on if we have the guest or not.
Soon, yeah.
Either way, we'll have beaten it, so we'll let you know the full score for it, because we're all going to talk about it. Michaela will be here too.
I'm going to come at you, America, with a review of Pokemon and also changes that I would make to the next version to make it really good. And it's not going to be what you think. I'm not going to go for the wish list of like, I want a gritty story.
That's good. We already did that once
You
anyway.
wake up and your parents are murdered. Their Pokemon are missing. I won't do that. I promise. But just some reasonable things that are borrowed from other series that Nintendo is actually doing already that I think could really make it appeal to everybody. So,
unless everybody hates the fact that the entire Pokedex isn't in it, so they don't give it a chance from the start.
Yeah, and unless Pokemon is just dead from now on, which
it won't be. These are selling really well.
Really well.
In fact, a lot of people who complained about it are still playing it and complaining about it, but enjoying it. So, you know.
Yeah.
The internet, right?
Yeah.
All right, that's the end of our look back at the best games of 1996. We will continue that series in the future until one of us is dead or we're all gone. In between episodes, you can find us at our website, objectionnetwork.com, on social media at Team Objection, on youtube.com/objectionnetwork for new videos 7 days a week, and you can send emails to the show to objectionnetwork@gmail.com. See you next time.